There's a moment seared into the collective memory of cinema. A stark, breathtaking image that feels less like a performance and more like a visceral confession. The year is 2016. The film is The Revenant. On screen, a man broken and brutalized is dragged through the frigid, unforgiving wilderness. He is a ghost, a creature of pure survival. His breath plumes into the icy air, a visible sign of a life hanging by a thread. This is Hugh Glass, a frontiersman left for dead. But off-screen, the man embodying this spirit is Leonardo DiCaprio, a titan of Hollywood who, for a quarter-century, had chased an Oscar with the same ferocious intensity that his character now chased revenge. The camera doesn't just capture his pain, it absorbs it. We see the real snow, the genuine cold, the raw emotion of a man pushing himself to the absolute limit for his craft. He eats raw bison liver, sleeps in animal carcasses, and endures temperatures that would fell lesser actors. Why? For a golden statuette, a prize that to many felt long overdue. After years of nominations and near misses, the snubs for The Aviator, the stunning omission for What's Eating Gilbert Grape, the agonizing wait after The Wolf of Wall Street, this was his final desperate gambit. The world watched, not just a film, but a quest, a cinematic pilgrimage to the pinnacle of his profession. We felt the stakes, the desperation, the sheer will of an artist demanding his due. And when he finally clutched that Oscar, the moment was not just a victory for him, but a collective sigh of relief for everyone who had followed his journey. It was a narrative of perseverance, a myth made real. But what if that was just the ending of one story and the beginning of another? What hidden burdens and silent struggles were truly driving that relentless ambition? What really goes on in the mind of a man who has it all, but still feels the need to prove something to the world? What really happened that night? Could there be a hidden truth beneath what we've been told? The story of Leonardo DiCaprio does not begin on a Hollywood set, but in a world far removed from its gilded glamour. He was born in 1974 in Los Angeles, but not in the mansions of Bel Air. His early life was in a working-class neighborhood, a grimy, raw corner of the city where drug addiction and crime were not abstract concepts but daily realities. His parents, Irmelin Indenburken and George DiCaprio, were a product of the 1960s counterculture movement, a free-spirited bohemian pair who named their son after Leonardo da Vinci, inspired by a painting his mother was viewing in Florence. They split when he was just one, leaving him to be raised primarily by his fiercely devoted mother. She worked multiple jobs to keep them afloat, a constant, unwavering presence in a chaotic world. His childhood was a dizzying mix of two very different worlds. By day, he was in a magnet school for gifted children, a space that valued intellect and creativity. By night, he was back in a neighborhood where violence was commonplace. He has spoken of watching addicts shoot up and seeing things no child should ever witness. These early experiences instilled in him a profound sense of observation and a keen understanding of the darker, more desperate sides of human nature. He found solace in performance, a way to channel the confusion and instability around him into something productive. The acting bug bit early, and his mother became his biggest champion, ferrying him to auditions with unwavering faith. She saw not just a boy, but a future. This was not a story of a child groomed for fame from birth, but a story of a boy who clawed his way out of his circumstances, driven by a desire for a different life, a safer life. He was a diamond in the rough, polished not by wealth, but by a mother's fierce love and the hard edges of a tough upbringing. It was a foundation built not on privilege, but on resilience, on the quiet promise of a young boy determined to escape. Could their early childhood experiences have laid the foundation for later triumphs or tragedies? His path to stardom was not an overnight fairy tale, but a grueling, often soul-crushing grind. Like countless other aspiring actors, he faced a barrage of rejections in small, uncredited roles. He appeared in commercials, a handful of forgettable TV shows, and even a straight-to-video horror film, Critters 3. He was a young man with an undeniable charisma and a look that screamed leading man. Yet the door to true stardom remained stubbornly ajar. He was a fish swimming upstream, a face in a sea of thousands, all of them chasing the same elusive dream. The frustration must have been immense. Every no, every casting call that went nowhere was a brutal reminder of the slim odds he faced. It was a period of professional purgatory, where he had to cling to the belief that his time would come, that all the struggle and sacrifice would eventually pay off. Then came the moment that changed everything. His role in This Boy's Life, opposite Robert De Niro. It was a seismic shift, a chance to prove his dramatic chops on a legitimate stage. He held his own against a legendary actor, not just with raw talent, but with an authenticity that was startling for a young man his age. This role led directly to his casting as Arnie Grape in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, a role that would earn him his first Academy Award nomination. He was 19 years old. Suddenly, he was no longer just an aspiring actor. He was a phenomenon, a prodigy with a face for posters and a soul for complex characters. This wasn't just a career break. It was a vindication of every late-night drive, every rejection letter, every moment of self-doubt. The struggle had forged him, making him not just a better actor, but a hungrier one. It set the stage for a career defined by an almost obsessive desire to prove his worth, not just to Hollywood, but perhaps to himself. Was the success they achieved truly worth all the pain they endured? With Titanic, everything changed. He went from a respected young actor to a global icon, a name that could sell a movie with just a glance. The fame was staggering, all-consuming. He was the subject of endless articles, a fixture on magazine covers, and the poster boy for a generation of teenage girls. He was a king in a world of his own making, traveling the globe, starring in blockbuster after blockbuster. The image he projected was one of effortless cool, of a man who had it all. He was handsome, charismatic, and seemingly invincible. He was often seen surrounded by a rotating cast of beautiful models and a close-knit group of friends, the Pussy Posse, a lifestyle that screamed of endless parties and carefree luxury. It was the quintessential Hollywood dream, lived out in plain sight. But behind the gilded facade, a different story was unfolding. The immense fame was not just a blessing, it was a cage. He spoke of the anxiety of having his every move scrutinized, the constant presence of paparazzi, the loss of anonymity. The very thing that had brought him to the pinnacle of success had also stolen a part of his freedom. He became a target for tabloids, his personal life a constant source of speculation. He was famous, but perhaps not truly seen. The public had an image of him, an idealized version that he himself seemed to struggle to live up to. This was the paradox of his fame. He was adored by millions, yet profoundly alone in his experience. The perfect exterior of the blockbuster star belied a deeper, more complicated reality. He wasn't just Leonardo DiCaprio, the movie star. He was a man navigating a suffocating world of fame, searching for authenticity and a sense of self that was constantly being defined by others. Behind all that glamour was there an unbearable loneliness that nobody saw. For many, Leonardo DiCaprio's career is a story of seamless success, a steady ascent to the top. But even for a man of his stature, there are moments of profound professional crisis. After Titanic, he found himself at a crossroads. He could have easily cashed in on his newfound fame, starring in a string of romantic comedies and securing his place as a Hollywood heartthrob. Instead, he made a conscious choice to retreat from the blockbuster world, seeking out more challenging, often darker roles. He collaborated with a director who would become his most important creative partner, Martin Scorsese. Their first collaboration, Gangs of New York, was a critical and commercial success. Their next film, The Aviator, was an even bigger triumph, earning him another Oscar nomination. But it was during the filming of The Wolf of Wall Street that the public saw the true, unvarnished whole of his work. The role of Jordan Belfort, a charismatic and depraved stockbroker, was one of the most demanding of his career. It was a performance of pure, manic energy. He was constantly screaming, doing drugs, and performing in scenes that were emotionally and physically draining. He has spoken of the physical exhaustion, the toll of playing such an intense character. He pushed himself to the brink, and the pressure was immense. The film was a masterpiece, but the physical and emotional cost was evident. He was chasing not just roles, but a legacy. The years of nominations without a win were weighing on him, creating a narrative of a man who was endlessly talented but perpetually overlooked. The public saw his dedication, but they also saw the fatigue in his eyes, the signs of a man who was running a marathon without a finish line in sight. This was a man at the peak of his power, yet still fighting a war on two fronts: the internal battle to deliver a great performance, and the external battle to finally get his due. Did this tragic event mark their downfall? Or was it simply the tipping point of deeper problems? In the wake of The Wolf of Wall Street, something shifted. The public narrative around Leonardo DiCaprio, once focused on his boyish good looks and party lifestyle, began to mature. He was no longer just the star of Titanic. He was a serious artist, a man deeply committed to his craft. This was a deliberate transformation, a calculated effort to shed the trappings of a pop culture icon and embrace the identity of a cinematic legend. He became more selective with his roles, choosing projects that were not only artistically challenging but also politically and environmentally significant. His work in The Revenant was the culmination of this shift. It was a role that demanded not just acting but survival. He subjected himself to genuine hardship, a physical and emotional trial by fire. He was no longer just pretending to be in pain. He was in pain. This period also saw him taking a more public and prominent role as an environmental activist. He founded the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, using his immense fame and wealth to raise awareness and funds for climate change and wildlife conservation. This was not a new passion, but an intensification of a long-held belief. He had always been concerned with the environment, but now he was using his platform in a way that was impossible during his younger, more chaotic years. This was his personal redemption arc. He was seeking not just professional validation, but a sense of purpose beyond the silver screen. He was trying to use his fame for something larger than himself, to leave a mark on the world that was more lasting than any film role. This was his way of finding balance, of proving that he was more than just a famous face, that he had substance, depth, and a cause that he believed in with every fiber of his being. Can anyone ever truly escape from the shadow of their darkest moments? After finally winning his long-awaited Oscar for The Revenant, many expected a victory lap. Instead, Leonardo DiCaprio largely retreated from the public eye. He took a well-deserved break, a chance to decompress from the immense pressure of his career. He has always been a private person, and the Oscar win seemed to grant him a sense of peace, a quiet validation that allowed him to step back and breathe. He was no longer chasing something, he had achieved it. The public still followed his every move, of course, the new girlfriend, the lavish vacations, but the narrative had changed. The desperate hunger was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. His career had shifted into a new phase. He was now in a position to choose roles based purely on artistic merit, without the added burden of proving his worth. He re-teamed with Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, a sprawling, complex epic that explored a dark chapter in American history. It was a project of immense scale and artistic ambition, a testament to his newfound freedom. He was no longer just an actor. He was a producer, a creative force who could get projects made. He was using his influence to tell important stories, to shine a light on forgotten histories. This was not a surrender of his ambition, but a redirection of it. He was now building a legacy not just through his performances, but through his entire body of work, both in front of and behind the camera. He was still a global superstar, but the frenetic energy of his younger years had been replaced by a more thoughtful, deliberate approach to his career and his life. He was a man who had finally earned the right to choose his own path, a path defined not by the expectations of others, but by his own values and passions. Were these final decisions acts of surrender or courageous acts of self-preservation? Today, Leonardo DiCaprio's legacy is a complex tapestry of artistic triumphs, environmental activism, and a life lived under an almost unbearable public microscope. He is one of the most respected actors of his generation, a man who has consistently pushed the boundaries of his craft and challenged the traditional notion of a movie star. Yet despite his immense fame, he remains an enigma. We see the public persona, the dedicated artist, the passionate activist, the jet-setting playboy. But who is the man behind the mask? What is the true cost of living a life in which your every move is a subject of discussion? One of the persistent questions that follows him despite his privacy is about his romantic life. The never-ending cycle of younger model girlfriends has become a punchline, a running joke in the media. What does this pattern reveal about him? Is it a sign of a man who is forever searching for something he can't find, or is it simply a byproduct of his fame and lifestyle? We see the headlines, but we don't see the man. We don't know his true vulnerabilities, his deepest fears, the secrets he holds close. The public knows him as the actor, the activist, the man who finally won his Oscar. But we still don't know the full story of Leonardo DiCaprio, the human being. What remains unsaid, untold, and unseen? The answers, it seems, are a secret he is determined to keep, and perhaps that is the most fascinating and enduring part of his legacy. He came into his own at a time when Hollywood was in transition, moving from the last gasp of the classic studio system into the era of the modern blockbuster. In this landscape, he wasn't just a face on a poster. He was a phenomenon, the kind of star who could ignite a cultural frenzy with a single role. But what does it mean to become that kind of icon? What is the cost of having your identity consumed and rewritten by the public imagination? Could there be a version of Leonardo DiCaprio that only exists in the quiet spaces, away from the glare of the flashbulbs? Was their success truly worth all the pain they endured? After the Titanic whirlwind, a different kind of ambition took hold. He didn't want to be the heartthrob, he wanted to be an artist. This was the era of his cinematic chrysalis, where he sought out directors who could challenge him and roles that could transform him. His partnership with Martin Scorsese became the crucible of this transformation. In Gangs of New York, he shed his pretty boy image, embracing a raw, violent intensity. The set was a world unto itself, a brutal recreation of 19th century New York. The physical and emotional demands were immense, but it was here that he began to forge a new identity, one built on grit, not glamour. This was the beginning of his deliberate, meticulous quest for critical respect, a journey that would define the next 2 decades of his career. But the most searing crucible of all was The Wolf of Wall Street. The role of Jordan Belfort was a high-wire act of pure, unadulterated energy, a manic symphony of excess. He spoke of the emotional toll of embodying such a depraved character, of the sheer exhaustion that came with sustaining that level of performance for months on end. Every line, every scream, every drug-fueled tantrum was a piece of him, a part of his soul he had to surrender to the character. This wasn't just acting. It was a kind of self-immolation for the sake of art. In the process, he began to wonder if success was a kind of betrayal, if the applause had drowned out the subtle cries of a man lost behind the shadow of a performance. Was every Oscar nomination a nail in the coffin of the person he once was, the person he never learned to be? For all the accolades, there was a feeling of an emptiness, a profound isolation at the heart of his greatest triumphs. Did this tragic event mark their downfall, or was it simply the tipping point of deeper problems? In the years that followed, the relentless pursuit of the Oscar became a meta-narrative, a story almost as famous as the films themselves. The public, the media, and even his peers seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for the moment he would finally win. This pressure was an invisible force, a current that ran beneath every project he took on. It culminated in the making of The Revenant, a film that was less a movie and more a test of human endurance. The production was a notoriously difficult undertaking, with filming taking place in remote, frigid locations. He ate raw bison liver, a gruesome act for the cameras but a symbolic one for his career. He was a man willing to suffer for his art, a man determined to prove he was more than just a famous face. The pressure wasn't just external, it was internal. He had always been a deeply private person, and the fame that came with his career had always felt like a cage. He had seen the way the media had torn apart other stars, and he had learned to build a wall around himself, a fortress of carefully curated public appearances and tightly controlled information. But the Oscar narrative pierced that wall. He became a symbol of a different kind of struggle, the kind of struggle that fame and fortune cannot solve. The more he achieved, the more he seemed to be fighting a war he could not win, a war against the public's insatiable desire to know the man behind the myth. He had become a prisoner of his own success, and the Oscar, when it finally arrived, was less a celebration and more an act of liberation. Can anyone ever truly escape from the shadow of their darkest moments? In the quiet after the storm, a new Leonardo DiCaprio began to emerge. The frantic energy of the Oscar chase was gone, replaced by a more thoughtful, deliberate approach to his career and his life. He began to dedicate more of his time and resources to environmental activism, a cause that had always been close to his heart. He founded the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, using his immense platform to raise awareness about climate change and conservation. This was not a new passion, but an intensification of a long-held belief. He was no longer just an actor, he was a global citizen, a man using his fame for something larger than himself. This transformation was also reflected in his professional choices. He returned to his partnership with Martin Scorsese, this time for Killers of the Flower Moon. The project was a massive undertaking, a sprawling, complex epic that explored a dark chapter of American history. He took on a role that was more subtle, more nuanced than his earlier work. It was a testament to his newfound freedom, a sign that he was no longer a man in a race, but a man in a journey. He was still a global superstar, but the frantic energy of his younger years had been replaced by a more thoughtful, deliberate approach to his career and his life. He was a man who had finally earned the right to choose his own path, a path defined not by the expectations of others, but by his own values and passions. Were these final decisions acts of surrender, or courageous acts of self-preservation? Today, Leonardo DiCaprio's legacy is a complex tapestry of artistic triumphs, environmental activism, and a life lived under an almost unbearable public microscope. He is one of the most respected actors of his generation, A man who has consistently pushed the boundaries of his craft and challenged the traditional notion of a movie star. Yet despite his immense fame, he remains an enigma. We see the public persona, the dedicated artist, the passionate activist, the jet-setting playboy. But who is the man behind the mask? What is the true cost of living a life in which your every move is a subject of discussion? One of the persistent questions that follows him despite his privacy is about his romantic life. The never-ending cycle of younger model girlfriends has become a punchline, a running joke in the media. What does this pattern reveal about him? Is it a sign of a man who is forever searching for something he can't find? Or is it simply a byproduct of his fame and lifestyle? We see the headlines, but we don't see the man. We don't know his true vulnerabilities, his deepest fears, the secrets he holds close. The public knows him as the actor, the activist, the man who finally won his Oscar. But we still don't know the full story of Leonardo DiCaprio, the human being. What remains unsaid, untold, and unseen? The answers, it seems, are a secret he is determined to keep. And perhaps that is the most fascinating and enduring part of his legacy.